Now, in the New Testament, a blessing can also describe the state of someone who finds their fulfillment in God. We find fulfillment through our forgiveness. To be reconciled to God is to be blessed. So now that we understand what a blessing is, we can define a beatitude. And this is a very formal definition, but I think it explains best the structure of a beatitude. So this is the definition. A beatitude is a pronouncement concerning those who are blessed, followed by a promise of why they are blessed. When we're reading the Bible and we see that Jesus gives a series of beatitudes, he is pronouncing towards those who have been given divine favor from God. For example, in the first beatitude, verse 3, Matthew says this, Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Here in verse 3, Jesus pronounces that those who are poor in spirit are blessed. He then promises why they're blessed, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Does everyone follow? That's what a beatitude is, a pronouncement concerning those who are blessed, followed by a promise of why they are blessed. Now, it's important to remember that when you read the Beatitudes, not to look at them as just a series of rules, a simple checklist of characteristics. They flow together and they make sense as a whole. So when you go home today and you read the Beatitudes, that's verses 3 through 12, what will you see? You will see the portrait of a disciple. The Beatitudes are Christ's portrait of a disciple. They're made up of 8 primary statements of blessing and a 9th statement that's really him expounding upon the 8th beatitude about those who endure persecution. And they can be understood more easily with this chart on the back screen. You can see that the first 3 beatitudes, they're about our needs, our reliance on God. And in the middle, the heart of Jesus' beatitudes is his blessing for those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And the last 3 beatitudes are about taking action. Those who thirst for righteousness and have applied the prior beatitudes, they will do these things. Does that make sense? Well, what's interesting is that when you study the Beatitudes, you'll notice that they align closely with how Matthew describes Jesus. 7 of the 8 traits that Jesus is going to use to describe his disciples, Matthew also uses to describe Jesus. For example, Jesus blesses those who mourn, and he himself is going to mourn over Israel. Jesus also blesses the meek, and Matthew tells us that Jesus himself is meek. Jesus blesses disciples who conform their character to his own character. And this is all very fitting because the goal of discipleship is to become more like Christ. As Christians, we should wake up every day looking for ways to become more like Jesus. So remember, when you look at the Beatitudes, they're not a random list of virtues that Jesus just kind of picked out of thin air. They're how he acts, and he wants us to follow in his example. Jesus is the perfect portrait of a disciple. Now, a theme of Christ's Beatitudes is that the blessedness of the kingdom of heaven is twofold. The Beatitudes remind us that the kingdom of heaven is a present reality and a future hope. This falls in line with elsewhere in the Bible where we learn about the reality of what we call the now but not yet doctrine. Simply put, as Christians, we're saved now, but our salvation is not fully complete until Christ returns. As John writes, he says, "Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure." As Christians, we're promised certain things that won't be fully realized until Jesus returns. For example, Jesus comes to rapture the church, Those who are raptured will receive glorified bodies. But that doesn't happen until that moment. Does that make sense? The kingdom of God is a present reality and a future hope.